I run a local organization. Every time I put out a proposal, no one wants to pay me a salary. They only want to pay for the services. So how am I supposed to take care of my own children? How do I go out there, raise awareness about protection, and come back home with nothing? And just for your documentation, I've had those scenarios. You know, I've had a day when I walked home and I couldn't buy one packet of milk. And I was thinking, should you do this? Am I doing public service? Isn't it? Who should pay for public service? It's the public. So how do we ensure that we have a system in which the public pays for that? I want to wind up in giving some data from a research that we conducted early in the year. I think this was around April, when we looked at what is the impact of the stop work order for USAID, how has it impacted nonprofits in Africa. And before I go into that, one of the things we were looking at is who is funding. What are the likely ways of funding child protection programs? You could look at funding at subnational levels, so either you're working at a district or at a county. I'm conscious that we are all not from Kenya. And there are many ways that this has happened. So county budgets, I've seen colleagues here who we've worked with in developing child protection policies for counties, because counties said, our law says that child protection is national function. So they cannot have a vote head, a budget line for children. So we supported Turkana County, I think Kisumu, Isiolo. I'm sure many of you have done some of this, Kilifi, Bungoma. But I'm really looking forward to see whether that has translated into more money for child protection programs. And one of those that inspired that is, I think it was Kitale or Turkana County that put children who live in the street in a truck and sent them to, which city was that? Either Kitale or Eldoret did that. And sent them and said, these are your children, keep them. But you see, if a child is in the vicinity, you should be able to respond. We've seen that at subnational level, faith-based organizations, local CSOs, M-Pesa, giving. I mean, many of us here are always giving towards a vulnerable family, either as relatives or just people you know. At national level, we need to think about how can ministries, national protection agencies be able to have this? How do we tap into corporate social responsibility? And then at continental level, we really must begin having the conversation. Where is the United Nations of Africa Children's Fund? What will that be? Will it be UNICEF, or what is it supposed to be? UNACAF, whatever it is, right? We need to have that, honestly. We cannot be a continent that fully relies on that. And you can't say that you're not rich enough, because there's always a way in which you cut your budget according to what you have. So I think these are very possible. Now, in this study we did a survey for 60 organizations participated from across the continent. And we looked at what is the impact on program, staff, layoff. Now, when we ask, what is your primary source of funding? Well, there could be bias that these people are already responding to the problem of USAID, but majority say that USAID, US government funding, CDC included and others were part of their majority funding, private philanthropy, others, so these were, you know, quite a mix here and there, European Union, local governments, and local private philanthropy. Does it mean that Africans don't give? Rarely do I spend, there's no month that has gone without me giving to someone. We give. My friend here says, Dr. Kiragu, that maybe our problem is we only give to problems, we don't give to solutions. So how do we structure our giving so that we can give to solutions? Now, from the US stop order, what was the greatest impact? Who was most affected? From that study, we heard it being the national NGOs, because they had a higher level of reliance, so most of it had to stop. Then the community-based organizations, but you see that there's a direct correlation between those two. Networks and coalition alliance on that, The faith-based organizations seem to be having a mix. I don't know whether they're receiving money from, is it Naitwa Sadaka? Yes, tithing. Can Sadaka lead into funding programs? Perhaps we need to structure it better so that that can be able to be done more effectively. And then the universities have been also greatly affected due to research and such other challenges. So what are the possible adaptive strategies organizations can use to be able to get funding, and what were they doing? This was a question actually to them. A lot of them said they're trying to find new donor partnerships. Okay, the USAID is gone, who else do we go back? Unfortunately, turning back to the West, especially to fund this. There are those who've gotten into local fundraising, so M-Pesa, M-Changa, and those kind of giving. The diasporas, we are seeing an increase in organized diaspora groups giving. So if you're Nigerians, you contribute money and give to a cause in Nigeria. Or people from your village in Muranga who live and work in Dubai can work together and fund a project. So these models are increasingly getting popular. Private sector giving, but I think we need a bit more incentive for this. Now I'm conscious my time is really up. So there are some examples that have been pointed out of a growing network and platforms for fundraising. Okay, you can take a screenshot of that. But we are seeing groups such as Global Fund for Community Foundations. Okay, there is the East African Philanthropy Network who have really worked on this for a while, and I think we need to be able to tap into their knowledge. NIA Network, for those who work within humanitarian work, as AICS, we're already working with them. And then there's WINGS, a global umbrella organization for philanthropy networks, participatory grant-making networks. So I think it is time to really make visible some of these philanthropic giving, but how do we go at the community level? So where is the gap and opportunity? We must stop our dependence on external donors. We must look at them addressing the weak mechanisms for community-driven financing and limited long-term or flexible funding. Have restricted funding just for specific activities and work on this in the long term. Let's see how we can tap into a pool of funds that allows you to continue building on the same strategy for a while. So the opportunities in mobile giving, okay, diaspora platforms, and also philanthropic networks, such as the ones I've mentioned. And then finally, what do we see therefore as an emerging financing pathway? There's community philanthropy and giving circles for local ownership. Let's build on that. Let's make ourselves visible with the activities that we are doing. Big accountability by local community organizations. I think we can use the Chama model, you know, where because we work together in one area, can you vouch for your partner organization and say we trust them, that they will manage the money well enough? And then I think I've already said some of these things, diaspora giving and endowment giving also. At this time, I will invite my sister to walk us through our experience as a government.
Thank you so much, Sam. Another round of applause for Sam. Thank you once again for making my work easy. So, colleagues, from the scenarios that the first speaker gave and what Sam has just told us, it's very clear that we need to think of a sustainable funding model that will help us cushion our children, especially in terms of climate shocks and other shocks, while we are able to also strengthen long-term systems of care for our children, so that we ensure that our children are thriving in a very, very environment. So I'm going to share with us a Kenya case study, and just a disclaimer that this fund is not yet operational. So we just want to co-create in terms of the discussion and the input that you're going to share with us. It is operational, or rather when it's near operational, then we'll be able to also take into consideration the discussion that has been given here. Now, the Constitution, especially Article 53, recognizes children as a vulnerable category of society and makes provision for their rights. And these rights include ensuring access to identity, education, nutrition, shelter, and protection from abuse and neglect. The same article, subsection 2, emphasizes on the best interest of the child, that whatever interventions that we do, whatever programs that we implement, must be in the best interest of the child. Now, the Kenya Child Welfare Fund is a creation of the Children's Act. The Children's Act, Section 12, 7, provides for the establishment of a child welfare fund. And the creation of the fund will provide the country with an opportunity, one, to mobilize resources to facilitate the full implementation of the Children's Act, to implement the care reforms. We talk of transitioning children from institutions back to families and communities, where research has shown us that they are given, or rather they have an opportunity to thrive in an enabling environment. So this fund is an opportunity for us to be able to implement the care reforms and address emerging issues in the children environment and safeguarding the rights and welfare of children in emergencies and difficult circumstances. I know we all saw what is happening in Elgeyo Marakwet and many other areas probably which we have not been able to see. So what is the objective of this fund? One, the fund seeks to promote parental and alternative family care for children risk or harmed from their biological families. And some of the causes of this separation could actually be effects of the climate catastrophes, you know. The fund seeks to support community-based initiatives that seek to strengthen and build resilience by reducing child poverty, vulnerability for families, thus preventing unnecessary family separation. There are those things that make children run away from homes to institutions or even to the streets. And so those are some of the things that we really have to ensure that the fund, once operational, is able to really address. It seeks to facilitate the planning, response to, and address the plight of children in emergencies and difficult circumstances, as I've just mentioned, and also establish an integrated national children data system and facilitate research on emerging issues for effective planning and coordination of children's services and inform evidence-based interventions. So in a nutshell, we say that the fund is designed to support emergency support, welfare services. It is aimed to fill structural funding gap beyond donor cycles. Sam has just explained to us the challenges with over-relying on donor funding. It's an opportunity to integrate climate-related child support programs. He mentioned of more funding going into climate change interventions, while very little resources go into child protection issues. But how do we bring that connection and ensure that we are actually integrating child protection into climate change so that then child protection interventions may benefit from climate change interventions? So what is the legal foundation of this welfare fund? Or rather, it has taken into account the PFM Act requirements. So the Act allows a creation of a special purpose fund, and this specific one is for social protection of children in emergencies. It provides a framework for transparency, oversight, and governance. You know how the fund is going to be governed, and stipulates clearly the issues of transparencies, It enables treasury allocation, reporting rules, and disbursement mechanisms. How is the fund going to be disbursed? And it also, or rather it can support co-financing in blended resource model. You know, issues of bringing on board donor funding, ourselves, and many other sources that can be used to enrich the fund. So what would be the potential implementation models? One, the government would allocate co-funding, both national and county governments, because we do not say that children belong to national government or to county government. Children belong to all of us. So the government would allocate the co-funding to the fund and would look at private philanthropy and CSR matching to multiply the resources. Because it's not only looking at government, but other actors as well who may bring in their corporate social responsibility to support the fund. Community contributions via M-Pesa, digital giving to build ownership. And some just alluded to the fact that we need to start giving not only to problems, but also to interventions or to solutions. It will look at Diaspora Solidarity Fund, which will also come in handy for emergency child support, as well as climate child resilient grants that are targeted to most impacted counties. So these are some of the priorities that the fund would look into. One is rapid response cash transfers for affected families. Take, for example, the families in Elgeyo Marakwet. Tuliona kwamba nyumba zao, sorry, I forgot that we also have colleagues from other countries. Yeah, you saw how some of the houses have been swept out. Completely, they have nothing, okay? So the fund would come in handy to really ensure that we are supporting such families to have a beginning, a decent beginning, so that they can be able to take care of their children. It will look at climate and displacement, ready foster and kinship systems, where we ensure that our children are able to be integrated and supported in family options, including foster and kinship. School continuity and emergency learning support. Because when we have these catastrophic effects of climate change, there's a lot of disruption in terms of schooling and many other social amenities. It would also go into supporting psychosocial and trauma services for children. Those children are most traumatized when it comes to such effects of climate change. It will also provide an opportunity for local early warning, community-led child-centered response system. You heard of what the first speaker introduced to us. The mechanism of ensuring that the children are at the center, or rather central, in ensuring that they are also participating in reporting issues of climate change. So in terms of steps to operationalize the fund, we are in the process of finalizing the regulations under the PFM Act, of course, again, guided by the Children's Act. We are hoping, or rather it is hoped that there shall be an establishment of a governance board, a board that will be able to oversight that fund, and it will be a multi-sectoral board bringing together members, or rather diverse representation from civil society organizations and other non-state actors. We are hoping that a launch will be done, especially a pilot in climate vulnerable counties, to just see how it rolls out before then it is rolled into the other regions. Build digital contribution platforms that will ensure that we are taking into account issues of transparency, and through a dashboard just to fast track how the fund is being implemented. It will be able to integrate climate risk indexing for fund allocation, and as well as annual public reporting and social accountability forums. So what do we envision as a country with this fund? We are hoping that Kenya will be used as a proof of concept for African Union adoption. Kenya has always been in the forefront in most of these interventions, and we are hoping that if we are able to successfully implement that fund in Kenya, then it will be used as a model and will be able to be replicated in other countries to be able to support an African child. We also envision that it will be able to give us an opportunity to establish African Child Resilience and Climate Fund. I think some did allude to that. Leverage regional philanthropy networks, those ones who are ready and willing to support such interventions, so that then we are able to pool resources together and be able to support interventions that are targeting our children. We'll be able to be an opportunity to mobilize private sector and diaspora markets at scale. And lastly, create a continental benchmarking and learning platform where we are able to learn from other countries or other countries coming to learn from us how to roll out the fund. Now, what will it take for the fund to really tick? Or what will it look like if we say that we want to see this fund really up and operational? One, it has to be anchored on law. So the Child Welfare Fund is aligned with policy frameworks, and it is actually linked to national and county priorities. So here we are looking at, of course, given the PFM Acts, it is also linked to Vision 2030 and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, as well as the National Care Reform Strategy, which seeks to ensure that our children are given an opportunity to thrive in an enabling family and community environment. It will have to have a clear mandate, so that when the funds are received in that kitty, then it's not diverted into other things. We'll need to have a diversified and predictable funding sources, so that we are not only looking at county and government sources as a resource, as a fund, but looking at other opportunities that will be able to really contribute to that fund. That will ensure that we are also taking into account sustainability and ensuring that we are also bringing other actors on board to be able to meaningfully contribute in the space of child protection. So it will also require robust governance and transparency mechanisms, which will ensure that we are actually fast-tracking how the resources are being utilized, and no donor or no partner will want to really put their resources where they are not accounted for. Community ownership is also very, very important, and local implementation, because if the community refuses that we do not want this fund because of one reason or another, then that will mean that it will not see the light of the day. It has to take into account results-based and evidence-driven financing. It needs to have institutional capacity and coordination. The agency that is supposed to foresee implementation of this fund will really need to have the relevant capacity and the relevant coordination, so that then it sees the light of the day. Political and public buy-in will be very, very critical, so that then we are having people championing for it, and including even at cabinet level, having champions at that level that are really creating awareness around the fund, and also creating awareness to communicate about the purpose of the fund and the impact that it seeks to bring in our children and communities. So our call to action is that we need to prioritize children within climate finance frameworks. We have to ensure that our children are very, very central when we are discussing around climate finance frameworks, and that they are actually central even to the responses. We need to institutionalize locally led child protection financing to ensure sustainability. We have seen the implication of over-relying in donor funding. So we have to ensure that locally we are developing mechanisms that will ensure sustainability of this fund should it see the light of day. We need to build blended finance solutions rooted in African systems and shift from crisis response to resilient investment so that we do not rush to address catastrophes that have already impacted on our children while there are some things that we should have protected in the first place. We need to protect children, protect the child, protect the future, and national prosperity, very, very imperative. So thank you so much, and I invite Sam to take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Gatti, and I know you're in charge of awareness, so you've done your job. They can pay you your salary for, which month are we finishing? Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us in this. I think for me to summarize it all is, I've heard when I've visited the other speakers in the abstracts and the other kids, that if you build a system that can respond to the most, it doesn't matter what else will happen. The entire system will respond to all of us. Okay? It's like one of my friends used to say, if you build the public transport in a way that persons with disability can easily use it and get to where they're going, everyone else will benefit. So a social system, social protection and child protection system that is effective, well-funded, will support us, whether we are talking about climate change, you're talking about gender issues, it will be responsive. So let us put money where our mouths are. We'll open up to maybe 2-3 questions, and then we'll invite the last presenter. Feel free to contact Madam Gatti through NCCS, contact us, and I'm really hoping that through the Child Welfare Fund, the community groups that are first responders can also be given some, okay? So that if I have a number of volunteers or employees, they know they have regular as a reimbursement from what will not need to take flights all the way to Mandera to respond when someone can respond. Let them respond, have a system reimbursing them. 2-3 questions, if any, or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And I actually did not intend to ask a question, but I'm forced to ask this question, although I come also from government. I've realized that all through the 3 days in the conference, we have talked about government to fund, and we have, yes, also talked about collaborations. And when Madam Pauline was presenting on financing, then there was also aspect of development partners, among others. But my question is, even at the level where we are, as we think about funds, do we also think that there are things that we can sometimes do and strategize on slightly with not developing just funds per se, but just thinking about generally us having activities or programs, but not generally developing a fund. This question has come perspective that one day we were challenged that in children issues generally we love duplicating. So today we talk about this fund, tomorrow we are talking about the other fund, and the other day we are talking about that fund. And we were specifically challenged about this, and I'm not sure whether Madam Gatti knows about it. What is the difference between this fund and the social protection? and the one that is supporting street families, and the one that is supporting counter-trafficking board. So why do we really need always to have so many funds and not even merge, then have several issues tackled with just one fund? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other? Very burning? Okay.
Thank you so much. My feeling is, yes, we want money, we want funds. It is true, children are the one area that is most underfunded. But I think we also need to build trust. My feeling has been, and the question he's asking, the Street Families Rehabilitation Fund exists. Have we reduced the number of street children? Have we made it better? We have these other things that are going on. So I feel like where we need to work more is, can we build trust that those of us working in child protection, if we were given more money, we would deliver better results? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allow me to end it there in the interest of time. Okay.
My point to that and him is, can we have a system where you guys use and NGOs? Because it feels like we are begging too much. All this fund. The building trust, how do you guys actually know our work? If I'm going to the MP, if I'm going to the chief, they know me. Okay, no, the MP doesn't. But the chief, we work with the chief. So is there a way that we can actually not ask for money, but the government knows that there's this CBO in Pangani that does 1, 2, 3 things with the kids? So it's no longer us begging, but we are working actually together.
Thank you very much. So I hear 3 things. One, can we build from a system level so that these things are talking to each other? And maybe it may be necessary to ask ourselves, do we fold some of those and put them under one for more efficiency in management? Just the same way we are discussing even about bursaries. I think it's progressive when people have to keep checking that. I'm also reminded, I think Dr. Sheila has said this a number of times here, there is protection happening within the education system. How do we account for the money that is put under protection services within that? There's protection happening in the health system. How do we account for that? Totally agree with you on trust issues, very, very important. And I want to tie to what my sisters just asked and give a solution. So I'll give an example. African Institute for Children Studies coordinates a platform called the Children Agenda Forum. I hope that website is up. It has currently about 195 organizations organized by county. The goal is to get us to talk to each other, to advocate for SDGs that are related to children. But more importantly, the challenge I want to give to us is, does your county area advisory council for children's services know you? Have you ever attended a meeting of the AAC? Because when we are at that level and we are coordinating, then you are visible to the teams that you are working with, and you are able to positively criticize and support where you are. And I think that's where we can build trust. Let us see the CSOs, the civil society organization, the CBOs, begin preparing annual reports for the county, Area Advisory Council for Children, and say this is the county status. And there are platforms, tools that are being created to make this visible. That will be my response. Let the government respond to the other one.
Sam, you're also government. Thank you so much. Those are very valid concerns and questions. To my sister, I think you've heard, so it's important to work with the government structures on the ground. And this does not necessarily mean that you need to have, funds, PESA. The children advisory committees, we have the structures at the county level and the sub-county level. And this is a structure that is you know, when you conduct interventions with that structure, even post donor support, you know, you are able to really continue working within your areas of jurisdiction because they are there and they know you, and you're actually adding your interventions to the work that they are doing. And they are government, they are sustainable. They don't need funds to really work with that. Issue of having multiple ports, I think it's and I repeat, is a valid concern, and these are really those difficult discussions that we need to have at higher level of leadership, so that then we even move from making our donors getting fatigue. You know, what we call donor fatigue, because you're giving to, this fund is asking for resources, this fund is asking for resources, and yet these are resources that are targeting the same child. So it's high time, and I think some from the conference report, I'm hoping this is not going to be one of the other conferences, and that the action points from this are going to be implemented. If there are those that require to be followed up, then this should actually be one of them. That we have numerous pots of resources. How can we make sure that we are amalgamating and it's able to be directed to the area, or rather to the need where it really serves? And the public is actually given an opportunity to hold government and each one of us accountable as we work with those resources. So thank you so much. The regulations for this fund are almost done. We shall be able to subject them for public participation, where you will be able to give your voice. Actually, be on the lookout for those regulations so that you come there and share how you want that fund run, including suggesting that we need to amalgamate all the funds that we have into one that will ensure that we have a very, very stringent accountability mechanism and ensure that we are actually holding each other accountable as we serve the interests of our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's it for the two of us, and hope those action points will go into the conference resolution. At this stage, I'll ask the DJ to play one nice music. We dance for 3 minutes as Dr. Kiragu comes up to take us through a class. Now the next one, make sure you have your paper and pen. This is a master class, and we'll collect school fees after that. DJ, tuachilie kamoja to stretch. I want you to be very fresh. Kiragu, you can set up anyway. So I will also seek your indulgence that maybe we'll go up to 1, and then we'll go for lunch until another 2:15, then we come for the closing ceremony.
Thank you. Mine is just an announcement as Dr. Kiragu sets up. After lunch, immediately after lunch, we'll be starting off with the closing ceremony. And the first item after lunch will be entertainment. And we'll have children entertaining us. And this is not tokenism, it is what generally they are prepared. So we are going to Samburu dance. Then we'll have also a live recycling scene in terms of clothing from a child from Busia. And then we'll have also a presentation from Elsie Mukami from Nairobi. She's a queen. And they also have a gallery walk. So this announcement I'm making actually is just an announcement from the children session. So prepare for that. There will also be a gallery walk, and you're allowed to visit the gallery as you proceed for lunch and also from lunch. Thank you very much.
It's Joelle on the beat.
Hey everyone, it's been a good session, a good 3 days, and we are are all sitting there pensively, I think we should just stand a little. Let's stand a little. Stretch a bit. Say hi to the person next to you. Maybe you've not said hi to them, you don't know their name. It's a good thing to do. Hi. Great. That is good. I'm sure you're now conversant with the person next to you. So this is going to be an exciting session. I'm passionate about fundraising strategies, and so I believe that you, because you're doing a lot of work in the development space, so please make sure that you come ready. Feel free to sit down. Now you can sit. Thank you. Thank you so much. So with me here is Dr. Michael Kiragu, who will be taking us through powerful fundraising strategies for 2026 and beyond. The donor landscape has changed a lot. Dynamics of funding have changed, have shifted. And so I want us to, if you have a pen and a paper, put it close to you. These are tips that you want to carry back home, strategies you want to start using immediately. After this, there'll be a question and answer session. So I want to karibisha you very much, Daktari. Take it off from here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to those at the back. Wow, this feels overwhelming to see faces all over. And I have a sign-in. That's my sign-in. If you don't have a sign-in, I'm sure there are people who can give you a sign-in over there. That's it's always important to have one. So I'm going to talk to you about things that you probably know, but hopefully bring them in a different way that you may not have thought about it. But I feel like a lot of what I'm going to share has already been talked about. The gentleman there raised a pertinent point, which I want to raise. Sam also talked about some very key things that I'm going to talk about. And just to begin, I just want to see how many of you work in a non-profit, an NGO, CBO, association, faith-based organization. Let's see, how many of you can raise their hand higher than their head? Oh, perfect. Okay, so let's see how many work in a non-profit. Fantastic, quite a big number of people work in the non-profit space. But it's not just a conversation for the non-profit people, but mostly it will talk about your work and how we raise resources for non-profit work. So for those who work in this space,
This meeting is being recorded.
Who is that? That's our good Zoom. So what do you think? Let me find out what your opinion is. Do you think non-profits are going to die? Is this a trend that's beginning that's showing us that non-profits are going to die? What's your opinion? Let's just hear. Either A, we have a unique role, so we are not going to die. 2, we have to radically adapt so that we survive. It's too early to tell. We can wait a couple of years, and maybe we should just start packing for those of us who work in the non-profit space. What do you think? Yeah? Just shout. We must radically adapt. Yeah, anyone else? Who thinks we should start parking? At least no one thinks we should start parking. I'm glad that many of you still think we have a role in the society. There is still work for non-profits to do. But then we have to radically adapt. We have to radically adapt. And I'll talk about the history and why we have to adapt now. We'll talk about how the non-profit space has evolved over time, what the future looks like, and I'll then come to the strategies that I want to share with you. So the non-profit space, the non-profits have been here for many years. 1950s, non-profits have existed. But for sub-Saharan Africa, the non-profit movement became very necessary around the 1980s. Those of us who were alive and who understood things around that time, we heard of these things that were called the structural adjustment programs. Do you remember such things? Yeah, where they cut down on the expenses, the number of staff they had. You know, there were significant changes driven by IMF, World Bank. Those pushed governments to cut down some of the safety nets we had for social issues. You know, so there was a radical reduction in the safety nets. But it wasn't felt around that time. The cutbacks in this began to be felt around the 90s. And they were accelerated by a couple of things that happened. There were serious famine issues around the 90s, early 90s. There was famine, and then now the HIV epidemic now was at its peak in the 90s. So there was need for aid at that time. In the 90s, there was need for aid to be pushed, communities to save lives. And so many of the governments and very many philanthropists, I don't know any of you whether you remember Heal the World campaign. You remember that campaign? Yeah. A bunch of celebrities came together. They raised a lot of money for the famine situation in Africa. It was called USA for Africa. That was the name of the campaign. So there was need to find a channel for these resources. And when they looked at our governments in the northern parts, and many countries were still at war within the sub-Saharan African region. So what happened then? To look for an outlet, the international NGOs. Those became the easiest channel to give the aid and to give the humanitarian support to those communities and families that were suffering at that time. That created an unfortunate situation because now we had a channel that went direct from the global north all the way to the communities. Sometimes they would have a few community-based organizations working with them, but most of the support was direct from global north all the way to the communities. So what that meant is that our local organizations thought that fundraising is going to international organizations to get a piece of what they have. And yet, as I hope to convince you that that's not the model how nonprofits should be operating anyway. We shouldn't be operating from that model. The model that works everywhere around the world with nonprofits is that they raise money from the communities that they support. They raise resources from the people who have a bit of privilege within their societies. So that process created a dependency in the 2000s and all the way to 2020s. But there was now beginning to have a conversation around localization. How can we localize this support? How can we have our interventions, be they humanitarian or development? So that conversation began around 2015, all the way to 2020, but it didn't gain any traction because the model of top-down resources continued. But then now came COVID, and then there was actually a realization that this localization has to be accelerated. 2025 is something that was expected. Reduction in overseas development assistance was expected. Many governments had already said that they were not going to continue supporting aid in the same way that they did. But 2025 became a cliff fall when the US government had those radical cutbacks. But it was expected. But also in this scenario, our governments, by 2025, many of the governments within the region were already mature and they were already demanding for this local aid not to go through the non-profits. It was to be channeled through government institutions. So there was going to be a reduction in your funding anyway if you're in a non-profit. That was going to happen. Anyone has heard of the Lusaka agenda? Anyone heard of the Lusaka agenda? Anyone? Wow, okay. The Lusaka agenda was a meeting between ministers of health. They met in Lusaka, and they met all these global actors, many of the financiers of the public health space. And what they said is that aid has to support local priorities. And it had to go through local mechanisms, and there was going to be a gradual shift of aid from the non-profit movement back to the exchequer. It had to come and flow through governments. So that was something that was going to use funding, and it started in health, but it was going to be part of all the development assistance. So in that sense, where are we heading as non-profits? So one of the things that we have to accept is it's the end of non-profits providing large-scale services. We had organizations that had bigger operations than some of our governments and county governments, providing services, be they health, education space. Though, a lot of non-profits who were providing those large-scale services are not going to access that kind of resource evermore. Because one, it's going to shift to government, whose job it is to deliver those services anyway. Then the second thing that's going to happen is that if you do not adapt back to your role, which is advocacy, which is looking at marginalized communities, which is about generating evidence and building models for service delivery, you might as well pack and go home. That's the traditional role of non-profits. Focusing on those who are marginalized, reminding and advocating for the people who are being left behind in whatever space. It could be in health, it could be in education, it could be in the climate justice issues. That's the traditional role of non-profits. And the traditional role is, if you look at all the non-profits outside our region, that's what they focus on, focusing on those who are marginalized. So if we do not focus on that, then we risk being picking up and going home. So the future of funding, how does it look like? We should not count on institutional funding. The USAID, the FCDO, all of this institutional funding. It's going to reduce significantly. What is going to go to nonprofits? What is going to come to our countries is going to be channeled through our governments. They've already declared, many of these institutional funders, that they are looking for government-to-government engagement. There's going to be less premium on technical skills. Why do you think that is so? So in the past, these institutional funders used to put out a call for proposals, and they ask all of us to bid. And we compete against each other. And one of the big things that won grants was technical. Why do you think that's going to be less important? What's happened in the last 2-3 years? AI. Artificial intelligence has democratized knowledge. Yeah? If you wanted even a model for a plane, for example, you want a blueprint for a plane, you can go to ChatGPT and get a blueprint for a plane. So there is less premium on knowledge. There is going to be a higher premium on trust. And that out from a presentation he had not had. That trust is going to be the main thing. And the reason why trust is also important is the AI issue again. It's the double-edged sword. Whenever you see a presentation like this, some of you are wondering, may generate na ChatGPT. Has it generated this from ChatGPT? Yeah? Isn't it? So how do you trust in such a scenario? How do you trust that this person they knows what they're doing? How do you trust in this scenario, in this era that we are moving to? We'll talk about it a little more. The main source of funding for nonprofits is going to be, as I said, we go back to people. We go back to philanthropy, which is a model for funding for nonprofits anyway. So in summary, the way we were funded over those years was unsustainable. It wasn't going to be there. And many of us came into this nonprofit movement in that period where I came into the nonprofit space at a period where money was almost being pushed at us. I started working in Eastern part, and they used to ask us, okay, what is your plan for next year? Give us a wish list. And the wish list almost always had more support than what we asked for. That was in the early 2000s. We got more resources than we asked for. There wasn't any competition. So that lied to us. So those of us who came into the movement that time, it lied to us that that's how nonprofits operate. There was a time we used to be called the four-wheel drive people. I don't know whether that's a similar scenario in every country where nonprofits were known to be the people who are rich. They drive big 4x4s and they wear shades because they are cool and you've heard that, right? Yeah, that was early 2000s. That all the way to 2010, that's where the money was. That's where you could drive in a 4x4, but that was not going to be sustainable. We need to go back to people, to the people we are supporting. Every year, there's this organization that releases an annual report. It's called the World Giving Index. The World Giving Index measures generosity based on 3 indicators. And they measure this around the world, whether you have supported someone who you supported a stranger, whether you have given money, and whether you volunteered time. The World Giving Index, so for those of you who are in Kenya, number 2 on that list is Kenya. Second on the generosity list. And it has been there for many years. And many sub-Saharan African countries are there. It's only that we throw problems at them as opposed to solutions. And I'll try and illustrate the difference a little later. Oh yeah, here it is. So here, these are 2 stories. If you're called James and you're called John, it's not about you. Yeah, there are 2 stories. I'll give you a minute to just read and tell me. So we have John. John is a farmer in rural Kenya. He has, his family has had only 1 meal for weeks. His clothes look dirty and worn out. He looks poor and sad. He blames the government for neglecting them. Drought has affected the produce this year, and he is desperate for our help. Second one is James. James is a farmer also in rural Kenya. He speaks with love about 4 kids. He smiles heartily. He has a great sense of humor. He appreciates the possibility of fresh food for his family. He volunteers as a Nyumba Kumi representative. For those from outside Kenya, we have Nyumba Kumi, which is 10 households. It means 10 households, where it becomes it's the unit of, now it's a unit of security in our country. It's 10. Drought has affected his produce, and he believes irrigation can help his community. So where are you inspired to give? Why? Just shout it out. His heart is pure. He already has a better future. Anyone else? Yes? He has a solution to his problem. A man of faith. Yeah? He volunteers. Yes. As a Kenyan, you'll give to Mzee John. Yeah? He's thinking of the community, not just himself. So Sam here tells me he raises money for the non-profit before I get fired. But if he approaches life like Mzee John, how likely is he to get funding from the local businessman who's very wealthy? Slimmer, right? Yeah, because sustainable giving is not inspired by the grim and sad state that we always present and project. Giving is inspired by hope. And that's a big shift that we have to do as people in this region. To move from that fear-based thinking to one that projects hope for our communities, for the people we support. There was a campaign, those of you in Kenya, they raised $4 million US, and you have forgotten about it. Why? Because it was convenient. It was easy to give. Yeah? We ask people to donate, but we don't make it easy for them to give. We also do not inspire them to give. So if you're thinking of the new era, and you are thinking of raising local resources, you have to make it easy for people to give. You have to inspire giving. And we'll also talk about some of the things that anchor the giving to make it sustainable and continue. Just because we know your organization, just because we've had it, doesn't mean that we trust enough to give you our money. Giving is a process we have to build as a skill. We are very transactional in nature. Kama hunipei, if you don't give me, let me walk on. I move on to the next. But that's not how giving happens. Giving happens from me building your trust, showing you that I can deliver impact. And it may take a couple of days, it may take a couple of months for you to actually give. You can imagine the number of times you have bought maybe, let's say, a course online. You probably have looked at that trainer once, you've looked twice. Maybe it's a book you're trying to buy. You've gone and read those first 2 chapters. You want to figure out whether this book is good for you. It takes time for you to build that trust, for you to earn the trust of the people who you want to give. So there's a process, and marketers know this. They use this on us every day. They never ask you to buy on the first day. They'll want you to just be happy you've heard of us, and they will rope you in. Next time they want to see whether you like them. And at the end of that cascade is trust. So we have to build that muscle. It's frustrating to many people when I tell them, you have building relationships, and it takes time. It takes patience. It takes, it's something for many of us, build trust. But fundraising, if you are going to survive, if you do not want to pack and live, you have to build the muscle of building relationships, having sustained long-term partnerships with people, because the era of competition is gone. I don't know if you're in nonprofits, how many of you have secured a grant in the last 2 years based on a grant that was advertised on funds for NGOs, you applied and you won the grant? How many? Yeah, not you? Oh, 0. You did? Congratulations. Yeah. It could be 1 in 100 have won, and it's basically because there are many of us competing for the same. Yeah, when a funder puts out a call for proposal now, it's gone to hundreds of thousands of people. And because of AI, hundreds of thousands of people can apply. So what are the chances of you winning? They're becoming slimmer by the day. So we have to learn to build those relationships. There are certain behaviors we have to unlearn. There are certain behaviors we have to unlearn. We have learned that to receive funding, we are either talking about ourselves too much, or we are talking about the problems too much. If you want to build relationships, we have to approach them from the point of partnerships, shared values. So if I'm approaching a local corporate, so I have maybe a local wholesaler in our community, and I want them to support our non-profit because we are addressing, it could be drugs and substance use within our community. Have to approach of what we both see. Do they really care about that there are young people who are drunk at 11 a.m.? Do they really care about young people who are a whole day chewing some illegal drugs? We have to approach it from the perspective of partnerships. Forget about this me, I do. We are the very best at this, we are the very best at that. If you're going to now talk to individuals, you're going to partner with individuals and local corporates and local philanthropists, we have to approach this from, we have to approach it from a perspective of partnership. We have to build strong brands that attract the attention of people. I don't know whether it's a trend in every country. Nowadays, they're called influencers, yeah? Our influencers are almost running a campaign almost on a daily basis, right? Yeah? On some issue, there's something that's going on somewhere. Why do you think they're so successful at it? They know how to get our attention. They are very successful at gaining attention. Attention is the most scarce commodity right now. Right now, as we are speaking, there's some of you who are on Facebook. Some of you are probably on WhatsApp. Some of you could be on something else. I don't know. There are new platforms coming up every day. Because there is a lot that is beneficial. For you to build relationships and for you to receive the funding that you need, you have to build a strong brand that commands people's attention. We are in what is called an economy of attention. The people who get your attention receive the money. Anyone who knows Mr. Beast? Yeah, we know Mr. Beast. Yeah, Mr. Beast is this YouTuber who, I don't know whether he's still the one who's highest paid. I don't know whether he's still at the top, but he's among those people who are right at the top. Now, Mr. Beast is a fit leadership. Those will continue to be really important. The things that I wanted to just talk about, why stories are such an important thing in this world. There's science, there's scientific evidence that is emerging every single day on why stories are the way nonprofits should be communicating. We should be communicating more with stories and less with data. Data is good. Data gives us proof that something is working, but stories will make you memorable. Because with stories, you will touch on different parts of the brain, as opposed to data that only touches on 2 areas of your brain. It's a scientific thing, human thing to be more inclined to stories. And that's how our ancestors, that's why they taught us. I still remember stories my grandmother told me when I was in a much better way. So we don't need to look at AI as this enemy. We need to use it strategically. For your grant writing, you can use it for your storytelling, for all manner of ways. There are lots of opportunities for us to use AI. In the 80s, we had these new things that came in that were called spreadsheets. And we also got this word processors. It wasn't called Word, I can't remember which. But anyway, we had spreadsheets that are like Excel, and we had word processors. So there were many people who were so afraid for their jobs at that time. Accountants, secretaries, anyone who was doing their work manually was afraid that computers were now coming to take over our jobs. And they did take people's jobs. But they took over the jobs of the people who did not embrace the computers. The people who did not use the accountants who did not learn how to use spreadsheets. The secretaries who didn't learn how to type on word processors, they lost their jobs. We are at that point again. If you don't learn how, they don't give a lot of money, but they give consistently. They are there on databases. You can find their reports, but you will not find their website. They don't care about putting out call for proposals, and they're there. So spend time learning how to find them. These are two platforms that you can use. One is free, another one is paid, but there are quite a number of free resources for you to use. And they're also not on AI. You cannot find them on AI. If you think ChatGPT is a solution to everything, you bribe them or give them what it is that they want. Initially, why did they give you money? Some of them want to showcase their impact. Are we giving them sufficient stories and data? Are you over-delivering on your impact? Very many times we receive this grant and we move on and we begin implementing the programs, forget the person who gave us the money, and we look for the next funding. We need to learn how to give thanks through gratitude, strategic gratitude. Understand why they gave us the money. Understand that they also have rights. Listen to where their interests are. Report. Going beyond what they've asked you. They probably ask you for a report every quarter, but are you engaging them in between the quarter and just letting them know that, hey, I'm here at the Kenya School of Government and this is what is going on. Has any of you given them an update just informally? That there are new things that are coming up from this conference. There are new approaches to our work. Yeah, so how many of you have updated them? Highly unlikely. So it's time we learned. I don't know where you saw this, but if you forget everything I've talked about this afternoon, trust is the currency. Trust is the currency that will take us to towards survival and towards building stronger partnerships at our community level. So the reason why we don't attract funding from people in our community is it goes back to trust. How many of them actually believe in what you do? Do you even update the people who you work with in your community? Do they even know what it is that you do? Or do they just see that beautiful signpost in Uranga? Do they know? Are they supportive? Can they defend you? We have to build trust with communities, with philanthropists, with funders, and all stakeholders. So this is a model. I'm ending. This is the model that we use at Bell Consultants to support fundraising efforts, supporting your relationship building, your impeccable visibility, so that's your strong brand. your organizational systems, how you write your proposals, how you find funders, and how you report. So those are 6 things that should not lack in your fundraising plan. There's 6 areas that should not lack in your fundraising plan. I want to thank your attention. Back to you.
Thank you so much. I think, trust is the currency. And I think if there's one thing to take away, you said less premium on knowledge, more premium on trust. I think that was impeccable, and lots of nuggets just pouring out from power-packed wisdom. Daktari, thank you so much. We'll just take probably 2 questions, but the contacts are there, so feel free to engage after this forum, during lunch, and also probably you can reach out to him on that email. In Bell Consultants, so I'm sure you do this even at a bigger scale. So 2 questions, very quickly. Anyone? Burning question, 2 questions? Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Hope, and I'm part of the team at a UN organization. Something I've noticed we have experienced in the past when it comes to donors, or even recently with donors, you mentioned that they have maybe their key focus areas or key interest areas. I'll just give a general example. I'm not saying it's this one specifically, but let's say it's a Canadian donor, for example, and as I mentioned, they have their key interest areas. But when you now try to see how you can apply or implement in the Kenyan context, there can be disparities. And when you try to foresee what will be the actual impact or outcome, you notice that maybe in the Kenyan context, we are not yet there. We are still miles behind. Well, maybe in Canada, this would be implemented very effectively. How do we now maybe balance that challenge where you want to make sure you're still recognizing, respecting, and meeting their key interest areas, while also trying to make sure it can be successfully implemented in Kenya, where in 4 years you're not telling the donor, okay, we tried, but it's not sustainable because Kenyan systems or structures could not maintain this outside donor support, let's say, for example. That's a challenge I've experienced, and I would like your guidance on that. Also because some donors are very strict on their key focus areas. So trying to sell a program or an idea to them, if it's not in line with that, they'll find someone else. So you try to squeeze and meet that, but I hope I haven't confused you. Okay.
Thank you. Another question, then he can answer at the same time. There's another. Okay. So we'll pick all the questions and then he'll answer at one go.
Thank you. I've been listening keenly. And from what I picked from your presentation, talked about donors looking for government-to-government engagement, maybe in the near future. I have an issue because you have also said that trust is the currency that will take us to the next level. Donors have engaged organizations directly, and now when you say they will be seeking to engage, to have government-to-government engagement. And with our governments, let me talk of our county governments. We know how accounting, even for the money they are receiving, even for the public, is a problem. I don't know how the donors are going to trust our governments more than trusting the organizations they've been working with. And I have an issue. What is wrong with trusting organizations? Maybe we need to know so that as we move forward, we also move with their pace. don't know if I'm making sense. But
Great. As we go, I'll pick it as I come down.
Can I respond to those, then we go for another one? Okay. Yeah, so that I just don't forget. So it's not that institutional funders do not trust non-profits. Let's get that clear. It's not that they don't trust non-profits. It's the work that institutional funders are giving their money for is not best done by non-profits. So it's things like services, so like health services. The best person to deliver on health services at a large scale is government. So that's why they are moving to give the resources back to the rightful owners. And I think they also have a sense that, you know, they may not give forever. So it's a way of showing who rightfully should deliver those services. So those are institutional funders. But when we look at philanthropists, the foundations, the individuals, they would rather work with non-profits. So what I'm suggesting is that we do not look to institutional funders and begin to look at individual philanthropists and corporates who we can build trust with them and move with them to the next level. I hope that distinction is clear. When we talk about donors, they are not one big group. They are donors who are institutions. So PEPFAR, USAID, CDC, those that are born out of government, those we call them institutional funders. Then there are those that are born out of people who, or companies that are well off, and those we are calling institutional, individual and private foundations. So my suggestion is you anchor a lot of your effort on the private foundations as opposed to institutional funders. The first question around donors' interests, and it's a very tricky journey to walk because, yeah, sometimes we want their money, but there are times we also truly believe that that journey is not, we are not going to where they want us to go. You may try to educate them. That's the first suggestion. Just try to educate the funders. And the way you educate them is a subtle way, is using stories. Stories of why it's not working. I would have given you a couple of examples on how you can educate without telling someone you're educating them. You're just telling them, I met Michael, he's a 10-year-old boy, and he told me X, Y, and Z are his priorities. So you haven't told him that this funding of yours does not work. You've told them the community saying their priorities on this other end. I think that's the subtle way you can do it. I know it's not always very easy, particularly with those people who, with institutional funders who have rigid frameworks. They already have predetermined outcomes, but then as much as possible we try and educate them. The other way we can approach it is to pre-educate them before the calls come out. Again, that's another story for another day, how you can pre-educate your funders before they put out the call for proposals.
Thank you so much for that response. Unfortunately, there are many burning questions and very little time. So I just want to bring it to a close now. The contacts are there. You can already see that our presenter is demonstrating his brand by the many reviews that are coming in streaming.